A struggling single dad returns a lost bag to a billionaire, but what he secretly left inside shocks her and changes his life forever. This isn't just about honesty, it's about a decision that turned poverty into opportunity overnight. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and see how one choice can rewrite destiny. On a rainy evening in Chicago, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered gold, but Daniel Brooks barely noticed the beauty around him. His mind was heavy with worries. Rent overdue, bills piling up, and his young daughter waiting at home. As a struggling single dad, working 2 jobs, life had become a constant race against time and exhaustion. While others hurried past him under umbrellas, focused only on reaching their destinations, Daniel walked slower, lost in thought. That was when he noticed something unusual near the taxi stand, a leather bag, left alone in the chaos. At first, he assumed someone would come rushing back for it. After all, people didn't just forget bags in a busy place like this. But minutes passed, and no one claimed it. The rain began to soak the edges of the bag, and something about it didn't sit right with him. He looked around, scanning the faces of strangers, but everyone seemed too distracted to notice. With hesitation, Daniel stepped forward, picked it up carefully, and held it close. It felt heavier than expected, almost as if it carried more than just physical weight. Curiosity mixed with concern pushed him to unzip the bag slightly. What he saw inside made his breath catch. Bundles of cash, neatly stacked, filled most of the space. Alongside them were official-looking documents, stamped and organized, clearly important. Nestled between them was a sleek, polished business card that stood out instantly. It read, Eleanor Grant, CEO of Grant Industries. Daniel had heard the name before. Everyone in Chicago had. She was one of the most powerful business figures in the country, known for her sharp decisions and billion-dollar empire. For a moment, Daniel's world seemed to freeze. The rain, the noise, the rush of the city all faded into the background as his thoughts spiraled. The money inside that bag could change everything for him. He imagined paying off his debts, moving to a better apartment, giving his daughter the life she deserved. It wasn't just temptation. It was survival staring him in the face. His fingers tightened around the zipper as he wrestled with the decision, feeling the weight of both opportunity and conscience pressing against his chest. That belief had been tested many times before, but never like this. Standing there in the rain, he realized this moment would define him, not just as a father, but as a man. With a deep breath, Daniel zipped the bag closed. The decision was made. He wouldn't let desperation rewrite his values. Instead, he would return the bag to its rightful owner, no matter how intimidating that might be. The next morning, after a restless night, he prepared himself. He wore his cleanest, though still modest clothes, ironed carefully despite their worn edges. Looking in the mirror, he saw not a man of wealth, but a man of principle. And for him, that was enough. The headquarters of Grant Industries stood tall against the Chicago skyline, a symbol of power and success. As Daniel approached the building, he couldn't help but feel small in comparison. The glass doors, the polished floors, and the steady flow of well-dressed professionals created an atmosphere that felt worlds away from his daily life. For a brief second, doubt crept in. Did someone like him even belong here? But then he remembered why he had come, and his steps grew steadier. Inside, security guards eyed him with quiet suspicion. His appearance didn't match the usual visitors, and questions were inevitable. Daniel explained calmly, showing them the business card and mentioning the bag. At first, they hesitated, exchanging glances as if unsure whether to believe him. But the name Eleanor Grant carried weight, and soon enough his persistence paid off. Calls were made, permissions were granted, and doors that rarely opened for people like Daniel began to shift. Moments later, Daniel found himself standing in a sleek office, face to face with Eleanor Grant. She was exactly as he had imagined. confident, composed, and observant. Her presence filled the room without effort. Daniel felt a surge of nerves but kept his posture steady, without unnecessary words. And he stepped forward and handed her the bag. His actions were simple, but they carried a quiet strength that spoke louder than any explanation he could offer. Eleanor accepted the bag, her expression unreadable at first. She opened it carefully, her sharp eyes scanning its contents. Everything seemed intact. Then her gaze shifted back to Daniel. There was a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by something deeper. Recognition. In a world where people often chose gain over integrity, what he had done was rare. She studied him for a moment longer, as if trying to understand the man behind the decision. Daniel stood there, calm yet humble, expecting nothing in return. For him, returning the bag wasn't about reward. It was about doing what was right. But Eleanor Grant saw more than just an honest act. She saw resilience, character, and a kind of strength that couldn't be bought. In that moment, into her office, she realized nothing but integrity was far more valuable than most people she dealt with every day. And something about him told her this was only the beginning. As Eleanor Grant opened the bag, her movements were precise and controlled, the kind that came from years of discipline and authority. Everything inside appeared exactly as it should. Bundles of cash aligned perfectly, documents untouched, and no sign of interference. For a brief moment she assumed this would be just another routine recovery of a misplaced item. But then, as her hand moved deeper into the bag, she noticed something unusual tucked between the documents. A small, plain envelope that didn't match the rest of the contents. Curiosity replaced routine as she picked up the envelope. It was simple, unmarked, and clearly placed there intentionally. Eleanor glanced briefly at Daniel, who stood quietly across the room, his expression calm and unreadable. There was no hint of expectation or anxiety in his posture. Turning her attention back to the envelope, she carefully opened it. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper. As she unfolded it, her sharp eyes softened slightly, sensing that whatever was written inside carried more meaning than the money surrounding it. The handwriting was steady, not rushed or careless, as though every word had been chosen with intention. Eleanor began to read silently. "I didn't count the money," the note said, "because I believe trust is worth more than anything inside this bag." The simplicity of the message struck her immediately. There were no elaborate explanations, no attempts to impress, just a quiet declaration of values. For a moment the room felt still, as if even time had paused to acknowledge the weight of those few words. Eleanor lowered the note slightly, her thoughts shifting in a way that rarely happened. In her world, trust was often negotiated, measured, and backed by contracts worth millions. Every decision carried risk, and every partnership required verification. Yet here stood a man who had encountered a life-changing opportunity and walked away from it without hesitation. He hadn't even counted the money. That single detail echoed in her mind, louder than any financial report or business proposal she had ever reviewed. She looked up at Daniel again, this time with a deeper sense of awareness. He stood just as he had before, quiet, composed, and grounded. There was no sign that he expected praise or recognition. His clothes were modest, his presence unassuming, yet there was a quiet strength about him that couldn't be ignored. Eleanor realized that what she was witnessing wasn't just honesty. It was discipline, character, and an unshakable moral foundation that few people possessed. For a brief moment, Eleanor reflected on the countless individuals she had encountered throughout her career. Many had impressive resumes, powerful connections, and persuasive words, yet when faced with real temptation, their values often shifted. Deals were broken, promises were adjusted, and loyalty became conditional. But Daniel was different. He had faced a moment that could have justified any choice, and he had chosen integrity without hesitation. That kind of decision couldn't be taught. It came from within. The atmosphere in the room began to change as Eleanor processed what this meant. The executives and assistants nearby remained silent, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Eleanor folded the note carefully and placed it back into the envelope, treating it with a level of respect usually reserved for important contracts. Her gaze returned to Daniel, and for the first time there was a visible shift in her expression, less guarded, more human, almost reflective. In that moment, Eleanor understood that opportunities like this were rare. Not the lost bag, but the person standing in front of her. Businesses could be built with money, strategies, and resources, but they could only thrive with the right people. Trust, real trust, was the foundation of every lasting success she had ever achieved. And here was someone who embodied that principle without even trying to prove it. The realization came quickly, but its impact was profound. Without overthinking it, Eleanor made her decision. It wasn't calculated in the way her usual business moves were. There were no spreadsheets, no risk assessments, and no consultations. It was a decision driven by instinct and recognition. She stepped forward slightly, closing the distance between herself and Daniel. The room seemed to hold its breath as she prepared to speak, her voice carrying the authority everyone expected, but with a tone that felt unexpectedly sincere. "Mr. Brooks," she began, her eyes steady on his, "I don't just want to thank you." There was a brief pause, not for effect, but because she meant every word that followed. "I want to offer you a position,